Picture this scenario. It is pitch black. The ocean is silent. Somewhere in the depths of the northern Arabian Sea, a ghost moves without sound. No radar can see it. No sonar can track it. And it is carrying enough firepower to erase entire military complexes off the face of the earth. That ghost is a nuclear-powered hunter, one of the deadliest submarines ever built. And right now it is waiting, armed, silent, and pointed directly at Iran. Meanwhile, above the surface, the world is watching a countdown. A 48-hour ultimatum from Washington, a coalition of 22 nations that has never been assembled this fast, and an Iranian regime that thought it had strangled the global economy, only to find the noose tightening around its own throat. What began on February 28, 2026, when the United States and Israel struck Iran and killed its supreme leader, has now become the most dangerous maritime crisis since the Second World War. The Strait of Hormuz, that narrow, irreplaceable choke point through which 20% of the world's oil passes every single day, has been effectively closed. And in closing it, Iran has triggered a response that is now shaking the foundations of the global security architecture. To understand how we got here, we have to go back to the beginning. On February 28, 2026, American and Israeli forces launched a massive coordinated strike on Iranian military targets. Among the dead was the man who had been Iran's supreme leader for more than 3 decades. That single act changed everything. Iran did not retreat. It escalated. Within hours, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps transmitted warnings over VHF radio to every vessel in the Strait of Hormuz. The message was simple and terrifying. No ship is allowed to pass. Not yours, not anyone's. By March 2nd, a senior Iranian commander officially confirmed what everyone already knew. The strait was closed, and Iran was prepared to enforce that closure with missiles, drones, sea mines, and submarines. The immediate effect on global markets was staggering. Tanker traffic through the strait dropped by 90% in the first week of March 2026. The International Energy Agency launched the largest emergency reserve release in its history, and Brent crude prices, which had been trading at moderate levels just weeks before, surged past $100 per barrel for the first time in 4 years, reaching a peak of $126 per barrel. Energy analysts warned that without a medium-term resolution, prices could push toward $200 per barrel. That would be catastrophic, not just for energy markets, but for food, fertilizer, aluminum, helium, virtually every commodity that moves through supply chains. This is the largest disruption to the global energy supply since the 1970s energy crisis. That is not hyperbole. That is what the numbers say. And yet, opening the strait militarily is far harder than it sounds. Iran has nearly 1,000 miles of coastline along the Persian Gulf. Its mobile anti-ship missile batteries can be repositioned constantly. The northern shore of the strait is not flat open ground. It is hills, mountains, valleys, offshore islands, and built-up areas. Detection of incoming threats is extremely difficult in that terrain. Iran can hide its weapon systems, and when it strikes from everywhere at once. Iran operates 2 parallel navies, the conventional Islamic Republic of Iran Navy and the ideologically driven naval force of the Revolutionary Guards, which holds sole responsibility for the Persian Gulf. These forces have been attacking commercial ships since the blockade began. According to maritime tracking centers, at least 21 confirmed attacks on merchant vessels had occurred by mid-March 2026. Ships have been struck by drone boats, ballistic missiles, and projectiles. Sailors have been killed. Crews have abandoned vessels. An oil tanker was struck north of Kasab, Oman, killing 2 Indian crew members. Another vessel was hit by a drone boat, sparking a fire in its engine room. An Indian sailor was killed on a different ship. This is not a hypothetical threat. This is active warfare against civilian shipping. Now, here is the response. On March 19, 2026, the United States formally launched what it called a sustained aerial campaign to reopen the Strait of Hormuz by destroying Iran's naval capacity to enforce the blockade. Ground attack jets were deployed to strike fast attack watercraft, and attack helicopters were sent to neutralize one-way attack drones. Military command published footage showing strikes destroying Iranian naval assets, threatening international shipping. The Pentagon later reported that since the beginning of joint U.S. and Israeli strikes, over 15,000 Iranian targets had been struck. Iran's missile volume, it was said, was down 90%. One-way attack drones down 95%. And in a statement to the press, it was declared that Iran's entire ballistic missile production capacity, every facility building every component of those missiles, had been functionally defeated and destroyed. But here is the problem. Even 90% suppression is not zero. And in the confined waters of the Strait of Hormuz, residual capability is still deadly. The risk to commercial shipping cannot be reduced to zero. Iran still has its geography, it still has its mines, it still has its submarines, and that is where the submarine lurking in the Arabian Sea enters the picture. On January 10, 2026, that submarine departed from Scotland under a strategic partnership agreement. It was heading to Western Australia, an enormous and strategically significant voyage of roughly 9,500 nautical miles. The submarine arrived near Perth in February 2026. At that point, its mission was training and maintenance. But everything changed when the Strait of Hormuz crisis erupted. According to multiple defense sources, the submarine departed Perth and turned north. It traveled approximately 5,500 miles across some of the most remote ocean on Earth. And by late March, it had taken up a strategic position in the northern Arabian Sea, sitting quietly, invisibly, directly within operational range of Iran. Let us talk about what this submarine actually is, because the numbers are genuinely extraordinary. It is a nuclear-powered attack submarine, the fifth in its class, and as of early 2026, the only fully operational vessel of its class in the entire Royal Navy. The rest of the fleet was either in maintenance, not yet operational, or otherwise unavailable. This is Britain's one shot, and it is a very good shot. The vessel measures approximately 97 meters in length. It displaces around 7,800 tons. It is powered by a nuclear reactor that requires no refueling for its entire 25-year service life. Unlike older submarines, it does not use traditional periscopes. It relies on high-definition video surveillance systems, and its acoustic signature is so low that Iranian coastal defense radars and submarine sonars cannot detect it. It is for all practical purposes invisible, but the submarine's real power lies in its weapons. Its land attack cruise missiles have a range of over 1,600 kilometers. These missiles can be retargeted mid-flight. They can transmit battlefield imagery back to the submarine in real time. And from its position in the northern Arabian Sea, they can reach deep into Iranian territory, command centers, underground missile silos, air defense nodes, naval bases, power generation facilities. The submarine communicates with the United Kingdom's permanent joint headquarters typically once every 24 hours. Any decision to fire requires direct authorization from the Prime Minister personally. Beyond land attack, the submarine carries heavyweight torpedoes. Each one weighs nearly 2 tons. They use advanced sonar guidance and are designed to engage both underwater and surface threats at long range. Iran has stationed at least 17 submarines in Bandar Abbas, including open ocean vessels and smaller coastal types designed specifically for Gulf warfare. The submarine is designed to hunt and neutralize exactly these kinds of threats before they can reach commercial shipping lanes. There is another dimension to this deployment that goes beyond firepower. Submerged and undetected, this vessel is also an intelligence platform. It can monitor Iranian naval movements in real time, detect mine-laying operations, collect electronic intelligence on Iranian radar and communication systems, and share that picture with allied forces in a conflict zone where information is everything. That persistent covert surveillance capability is worth as much as the cruise missiles themselves. Now, the deployment of this submarine did not happen in a vacuum. It came alongside a series of decisions by the British Prime Minister that mark a fundamental shift in London's strategic posture. The immediate trigger, as multiple sources confirm, was Iran's ballistic missile attack on a critical joint UK-US base in the Indian Ocean. One missile broke apart in mid-air. The second was intercepted at the last moment by American defense systems, but the strategic message was unmistakable. With a confirmed range of 4,000 kilometers, Iranian ballistic missiles now put capitals across Europe, including London, Paris, and Berlin, within theoretical range. That changed the Prime Minister's calculus. The British government responded in two steps. First, it granted the United States full authority to use British military bases for operations against Iranian targets. That authorization, initially limited to defensive measures, was subsequently expanded to cover operations protecting maritime shipping directly, including offensive strikes. Second, in a decision confirmed by defense sources, the Prime Minister gave the order that sent the submarine north from Perth into the Arabian Sea. The Iranian foreign minister was direct in his condemnation. He warned Britain that its decision to allow U.S. forces to use British bases amounted to participation in aggression. Beyond the submarine, Britain has assembled a broader naval and air presence in the region. A destroyer equipped with one of the most advanced air defense systems in the world departed the UK to protect airspace around a key base in Cyprus. Royal Air Force fighter jets stationed at bases in Qatar and Cyprus have been placed on active readiness to counter Iranian drone swarms. Helicopters armed with anti-surface missiles are standing by to hunt fast attack boats. A permanent UK naval support facility in Bahrain, housing 500 military personnel, is coordinating the overall operation, and a logistics support ship is on high readiness prepared for civilian evacuation scenarios if required. It is a significant military commitment, but it is also a fragile one. The Royal Navy has limited surface vessels in the region. The last minehunter was retired earlier in 2026, and the submarine is the only fully operational vessel of its class that Britain has available. Every piece of this chessboard matters enormously. Now here is where the diplomatic dimension becomes just as fascinating as the military one. The United States has been struggling to build a coalition to share the burden of securing the strait, and the struggle has been very public and at times very ugly. On March 15, 2026, the American president called on countries of the world that receive oil through the Strait of Hormuz to take care of that passage militarily. The response from most of its NATO allies ranged from skepticism to outright refusal. Germany's defense minister said the situation was not their war. A European foreign policy chief told reporters after an EU foreign ministers meeting that there was no appetite among the 27 EU member states to join the American coalition. The American president's reaction was characteristically forceful. He called his NATO allies cowards. He described the alliance as a paper tiger without the United States. He said he would remember the countries that refused. And he announced the United States would work instead with Israel and Gulf nations. But beneath the public fracturing, a quieter diplomatic process was running in parallel. Britain had been circulating a plan, and slowly nations began to sign on. By the time a formal joint declaration emerged, 22 countries had added their signatures. The founding group, including the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Japan, was joined by Canada, South Korea, New Zealand, Sweden, and Finland. Critically, Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates also joined, providing regional legitimacy to the effort. The coalition issued a statement officially declaring Iran's blockade a clear violation of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. They cited a relevant Security Council resolution. They condemned Iran's attacks on civilian infrastructure, energy facilities, and commercial vessels in the strongest available diplomatic language, and they announced support for countries conducting contingency planning to ensure safe passage through the strait, diplomatic language for endorsing whatever military action the United States and United Kingdom choose to take. The economic scaffolding was being erected alongside the military one. In coordination with the International Energy Agency, strategic oil reserves were released to ease market pressure. The U.S. Treasury Department granted a 30-day exemption period for Iranian oil sales to temporarily calm the global energy crisis while the military dimension played out. But behind all of this, a far more consequential document was circulating. According to leaked reporting, Washington conveyed its final conditions to Tehran through intelligence channels using Egypt, Qatar, and the United Kingdom as intermediaries. These are not negotiating positions. They read more like terms of surrender. 6 demands. First, Iran must immediately suspend its ballistic missile program for a period of 5 years. Second, all uranium enrichment must cease completely, with enrichment levels reduced to 0. Third, critical nuclear reactors at key Iranian facilities must be sealed. Fourth, the number of ballistic missiles in Iran's possession must be capped at a maximum of 1,000. Fifth, all financial and military support to regional proxy forces including Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Hamas must be cut off entirely. Sixth, and implicitly, Iran must reopen the Strait of Hormuz immediately and unconditionally. As the U.S. Secretary of State outlined publicly, the objectives of the military campaign are the destruction of Iran's air force, the destruction of its navy, the severe degradation of its missile capability, and the destruction of its weapons manufacturing infrastructure. As he put it directly, Iran can never hide behind that infrastructure to acquire a nuclear weapon. He also stated with unmistakable clarity that Iran would not be allowed to establish a permanent regime of control over international waterways. That will never be allowed to happen. Iranian state media, citing an unnamed senior official, confirmed that Tehran rejected the U.S. proposal. Iran laid out its own conditions: a complete halt to what it called aggression and assassinations, concrete guarantees against the reimposition of war reparations, and most provocatively, explicit exercise of sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. That last demand is a non-starter for Washington. It always will be. So where does that leave us? On March 21st, the American president issued a direct ultimatum. He warned that Iran's power plants would be obliterated unless the strait was fully reopened. The primary target identified was a major combined cycle power plant supplying electricity to Tehran. A strike on that facility would plunge the Iranian capital into darkness and trigger an economic catastrophe from which the regime might not recover. He also threatened Karg Island, the critical facility through which Iran exports approximately 90% of its crude oil. Israeli strikes had already hit Iran's South Pars gas field on March 18th. Tehran responded by attacking gas facilities in Israel, Kuwait, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. Among the targets struck was the world's largest liquefied natural gas export installation near Doha, Qatar. The escalation ladder is being climbed one rung at a time. And there is a second front that demands attention, because the crisis in the strait is not the only choke point in play. On March 28th, the Houthis in Yemen launched missiles and drones toward Israel, opening a new front in the expanding conflict. By late March, Iranian officials were signaling they might push their Houthi allies to block the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, the Red Sea's critical choke point, in retaliation for U.S. escalation. If both the Strait of Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandeb are closed simultaneously, the disruption to global shipping would be without modern precedent. 2 of the world's most critical maritime arteries closed at the same time. That is not a scenario. That is a warning that is already being spoken aloud by Iranian-aligned forces. There is also what military analysts call the ghost fleet threat. Beneath the surface of the Gulf, beyond what aircraft can easily detect from altitude, Iran is believed to operate a force of submarines specifically designed for the Gulf's shallow and murky waters. These vessels can set underwater ambushes against commercial giants attempting to pass through the strait. Iran has at least 17 submarines stationed at Bandar Abbas, including open-ocean vessels and the stealthy coastal class built for Gulf warfare. These are the targets that the submarine's heavyweight torpedoes were made to hunt. Now there is a powerful new actor potentially entering this equation: Japan. Tokyo has signaled that if a ceasefire is established, it could deploy naval assets to the strait for mine clearance operations. As the Japanese foreign minister stated in a March 22, 2026 declaration, a decision on sending ships for a mine-clearing mission in the Strait of Hormuz would follow a ceasefire. Under Japan's constitution, direct military intervention in an active conflict zone is prohibited. But a humanitarian maritime security mission after a ceasefire is a different legal and political framework. Japan conducted a similar operation following the 1991 Gulf War when 6 minesweepers were deployed. Japan possesses one of the world's most technically advanced mine countermeasure fleets. Its participation would both accelerate the physical reopening of the strait and significantly broaden the international legitimacy of the coalition effort. But Japan's involvement and the effectiveness of everything else the coalition is doing ultimately depends on one thing: getting to a ceasefire. And right now, that does not appear imminent. Let us now step back and look at the full picture that is emerging from all of these moving pieces. The United States has struck over 15,000 Iranian targets since February 28. Iran's offensive military capacity has been significantly degraded. Its missile production infrastructure has reportedly been dismantled. Its naval presence in the strait has been reduced, and yet the strait remains effectively closed. Iran still has the geography. It still has the mines, it still has its submarines, and its coastline of nearly 1,000 miles cannot be cleared by airstrikes alone. The United States has several escalatory options still on the table. A distant blockade of Iranian oil exports through Karg Island, seizing shadow tankers carrying Iranian oil between the Strait of Hormuz and the Strait of Malacca. A close blockade of Iranian non-oil imports using the fact that 80% of Iran's imports pass through Hormuz to create maximum economic pressure, or direct strikes on Karg Island's energy infrastructure, a step that has been threatened but not yet taken as of the time of writing. Meanwhile, Iran's own terms for ending the war, including sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz, are a provocation that Washington will never accept. The American Secretary of State made that explicit, and the president's ultimatums grow increasingly severe with each passing day. The 22-nation coalition provides international legitimacy, but even initiating a full military campaign to physically reopen the strait could trigger a global economic crisis. The Persian Gulf states, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, rely heavily on maritime imports for daily necessities. A full conflict would trap them in the crossfire. The stance of China and Russia adds another layer of strategic complexity. Beijing and Moscow have been notably absent from any coalition against Iran. China, in fact, has been receiving Iranian oil throughout the conflict, a fact that the United States may need to address by intercepting Iranian shadow tankers. If Washington moves to cut off Chinese oil receipts from Iran, that introduces a direct U.S.-China dimension to a crisis that was already complicated enough. And then there is the possibility that Beijing uses this moment to recalibrate its own calculations regarding Taiwan. If Washington is stretched thin militarily, politically, and economically by the Hormuz crisis, that window does not go unnoticed in Beijing. Let us be direct about where things stand on this April 1, 2026. The 48-hour ultimatum from Washington is drawing to its close. Iran has rejected U.S. terms. Its military has been severely degraded, but not destroyed. The Strait of Hormuz remains effectively closed with shipping traffic still dramatically below normal levels. Brent crude has surged to its highest price in years. The International Energy Agency has released emergency reserves, but that is a temporary measure. The 22-nation coalition exists, but its cohesion is under pressure. NATO allies are divided. Japan is waiting on a ceasefire that has not arrived. And beneath the surface of the northern Arabian Sea, that nuclear-powered submarine is waiting for a single encrypted transmission from its headquarters that no one in Tehran can intercept. This crisis began in the spring of 2026 as a regional conflict. It has since become something far larger. It is a test of how the rules-based international order responds when one nation decides to close a critical global waterway by force. It is a test of how alliance structures function when the United States demands its partners take on risks they would prefer to avoid. It is a test of whether economic pressure can be weaponized faster than military pressure can be answered. And it is a test of whether a nuclear-powered submarine lurking in the deep can deter a regime that has already decided it has nothing left to lose. The world's leaders, markets, and populations are watching. They are all waiting for the same thing: a decision. Either the Strait of Hormuz opens and the global energy supply chain stabilizes, or it does not, and we enter an era of global uncertainty, unlike anything the modern international system has experienced. The answers to those questions are being written right now, not in press conferences, not in diplomatic cables. They are being written in encrypted transmissions to a submarine nobody can find, and in decisions being made in Tehran by people who are now cornered.